Welcome everyone to this session of Capital HQ. Today I am privileged to have Tom Maples, CEO of Revenue Catalyst Limited, or RevCat in short. He's a revenue and CS leader, C-level leader, known for his remarkable journey in driving predictable revenue growth across various industries. Tom's extensive experience, ranging from his military service to spearheading innovative revenue strategies, has positioned him as a thought leader in the field. In this session, we'll dive deep into his experiences, the RevCat method, which is a unique approach blending AI-driven strategies with traditional revenue management. We'll explore the pivotal role of a chief revenue officer in early-stage companies, understanding how this position can be a game changer in driving sustainable growth and recurring revenue. Tom will also share his personal insight on industry trends, the challenges and triumphs of his journey, and the outlook of revenue growth management. And for the founders and investors in our audience, this is a golden opportunity to gain valuable insights and consider the potential of RevCat in your growth strategy. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Hugo. Quite an introduction. Thanks.
Great. So let's go straight into your journey so far. So journey from military to founding RevCat. So given your diverse background from military service to leading positions at multiple companies such as Salesforce, how has this journey shaped your vision and approach in founding RevCat?
Sure. I think the military is sort of well known for what it teaches you. You learn nothing about commercial, but you learn quite a lot about managing teams, and leadership's quite an overused word, but you do learn a bit about that. And I think there I learned how to tell people what to achieve rather than what to do. And I think then I accidentally fell into tech, and Salesforce is an amazing company in terms of teaching people the science behind selling rather than, excuse me, I cut myself shaving this morning, so and teaching people the science behind selling rather than the art of trying to charm people into buying stuff. And I think taking that knowledge and the knowledge from the military allows you to be something approaching a CRO, because you can tell people what target to achieve or what metric to achieve, whether they're a salesperson, a lead generator, a customer success. You don't necessarily have to tell them how to do it. You obviously support them and give them what they need, but you don't have to micromanage them. So it makes it quite an enjoyable experience. So after Salesforce, I took some of the knowledge I'd taken from there, and I don't pretend to know everything they do, but I started working in startups and basically becoming a chief revenue officer. It's quite a grand title because there are chief revenue officers of companies with 20,000 people, and there are chief revenue officers of companies with 20 people. So I started near the bottom, and I think that's really where I began to implement the science of sales and learn, a number of lessons from it. But yeah, I hope that sort of answers the initial journey. And then the most recent iteration of it is becoming a fractional CRO, working for multiple startups at the same time, which is great. It's really challenging because you've got everything from social impact tech platforms through to cybersecurity and others. But the science behind it is almost always the same. And that led me to think, well, why can't we get AI to essentially do this better than most humans, or at least provide a co-pilot for founders? So, it's a pretty scientific process, as I've said. So why can't AI do it better? It can access more data, and that's what we've built with RevCat.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually saw a report yesterday. The world's fastest supercomputer can compute 5 quintillion calculations in a second. And what really put into context is if you take all human beings at any one point, doing one calculation every second, it would take them about 10 years to get to that, and they do it in a second. So that's where we're going. Look, in terms of, you went from public service with the military to a public company, right? Mm-hmm. To now smaller companies in the private space. What led you to make those transitions? So the first one from the military to Salesforce, and then Salesforce to going to startups.
Sure. So the army or the military, and people may disagree with me on this, is kind of unlike any other career, especially as a junior officer, in the sense that most careers get more exciting and enjoyable the higher up you go. And I'm not pretending being a general isn't interesting. I'm sure it is. And I worked for one and I saw it. But the army is really exciting at the beginning. You're on the ground, you're with soldiers, you're at the coalface, and then you kind of end up sitting at a desk a bit more frequently the higher up you go, and I didn't really want to do that. So I wanted to get out while I could. And I'm not saying there's an end point, but some of my friends who stayed a bit longer have struggled. So I got out and decided that the thing I really needed to do, having spoken to friends of mine in the commercial world, is to understand the financial side, the sales side, the commercial bit. You know, in the military, ops is king. It's the sexiest job. Outside, in my opinion, commercial is more interesting than ops. So that shift was an interesting sort of mindset, mentality shift.
Right. And then going from Salesforce to, you had a good position there, to moving to working with startups. So you talked about 20,000 moving to 20-person organizations. What made you take that change and want to do that?
I think I've spent enough time being a small cog in a big machine, and I don't think you can affect as much change. I by nature have quite a high tolerance to risk, and I actually ended up leaving during the pandemic and helping a company that was trying to help companies during the pandemic. It was a small one, and there were less than 20 of us. So that was really exciting. And I think also if you are in business and you're in business to make some money, then being at a small company that succeeds is an attractive way of doing that. Whether it succeeds or not is another matter. But, yeah.
Coming back to that high risk.
Exactly.
So look, let's go into the CRO's role in early growth, right? So in the initial stages of a company, when the founders often handle sales, at what point do you believe it becomes crucial to transition into responsibility to a dedicated CRO?
I think a founder is wearing the CRO hat part of the time from the beginning, right? Like, you put together a business plan you should, I'm sure, put together a go-to-market strategy and a business plan around the same time you decide what you're going to sell, and what you're going to build. So the CRO hat's always being worn, whether you're convincing investors you've got a roadmap ahead of you, or the first customers, like what's the messaging I'm putting out there. If you could have a CRO from the beginning, it would be great. And that's why I'm sure founders with CRO backgrounds find that aspect a bit easier. I think it's a chicken and egg problem, though, right? They're really expensive CROs, and they could get it wrong quite easily, and that's a big investment gone. You kind of need a CRO to manage the revenue growth team you end up building, the sales, the customer success, and everything else. But until you have that team, there's almost no point in having a CRO to manage them. So it's a chicken and egg problem. And I think what a lot of founders find tricky is they love their product. Even I'm guilty of this, even though I understand this aspect. They love their product. They think everyone should buy it. They think everyone will buy it, and the product will sell itself. And actually building the product is just one aspect. Getting people to buy it is quite another. Even if you're first in your industry, so you're not competing with established players, which is difficult enough, you've got to convince people to try your entirely new approach to it, and that's a challenge, especially if you're selling to businesses that have established views and have assigned budgets and have the baby that one of them holds, which is the IT system they bought 5 years ago or built. So I think you need some of the aspects that the CRO does from the beginning. And I think that is one of the many hats that founders wear, and can be quite an overwhelming one, because it's not only very specialized in terms of how you do it. The actual salesperson aspect can be daunting to some people, but also it's difficult in terms of the metrics and the recurring revenue you want to achieve and everything else.
So then the question comes to, at what point do you believe it becomes crucial? So with that chicken and egg problem, right? Yeah. I guess it differs for a lot of companies, but would you say there's a specific moment where it's not longer a want of having a CRO, but it becomes a need to have a CRO?
Yeah. I think that looking at the evidence, most companies, around just post or just pre-Series A are probably looking to get a CRO if they are, a B2B SaaS business. That's really the only one I can speak with any credibility on that type of business. But in any industry within that, so around sort of Series A, B, the question is, do you get a head of sales first? And that head of sales is kind of a pseudo CRO, and I define the difference as a CRO manages the marketing, the customer success, the leads, and the sales, whereas a head of sales just does the sales. So I think that around Series A or B, you're probably going to have one. But if you can have one to get there, that's really helpful as well. Some people have CROs who also sell. Some people really invest in having a CRO who doesn't and builds the team. So there are different ways of approaching it. But if you're asking me when a CRO becomes financially viable, that's difficult, right? And lots of these companies grow investment round to investment round, if you're trying to be profitable from the beginning and get a CRO, that's really difficult. Really
Right.
difficult. They are expensive.
And what are some typical challenges that you've seen startups face when moving from founder-led sales to a more structured approach under a CRO?
I think the key is if you haven't built a system from scratch that can scale, then you're going to find it hard, right? Not only until the point when you get a CRO, because you're doing it basically on the founder's own skill. So you get your first salesperson and they're going to be a bit confused because they don't know exactly what structure they should be selling it in. You get your CRO, they're going to want to reinvent the wheel, and that's going to be problematic for the company, and they may reinvent it wrong. And that not only shifts the company but could affect sales for a couple of quarters or a year. So I think as long as you build something at the beginning that's scalable, you can generate leads and track where they go. You can measure your pipeline maturation progress, and you understand how you're qualifying deals and how you're closing them in that kind of customer journey. You're able to scale the sales themselves using all the right metrics. You know where your marketing money is going in order to produce the sales leads, in order to produce the end revenue. That's the key, is you've got to build something scalable from scratch. And that's really hard to do because most founders haven't got a clue. And they're much more focused on building a really cool product, which is, makes sense in some ways.
Okay. And then so your tip would be to have as much of a scalable solution for revenue and growth from the get-go then.
Yeah, I think so.
And then for perhaps for first-time founders who are listening in, or people looking to endeavor into a project, how do they do that? How would you? I know it's a big
Apart
question.
from buying RevCat, no, I'm joking. I think look, there's all kinds of literature out there, books and thought leadership, right? There's, I don't know if I can plug people I found really inspirational, but Gap Selling, John McMahon's book, all of these kind of CROs have written stuff. The problem is there's so much information out there. Which process do you implement? How flexible should it be versus how defined, so that you can change as you go, but it's got enough of a kind of resonance at the beginning, is a tricky one to do. I think firstly, you've got to be really pessimistic and think, right, why is someone buying this product? Not because it does something cool, but what effect does that have on their business? And it's either going to affect revenue, cost, or risk. That's it, right? That's like the only reason the businesses do things. So what does it affect there? And then you think, right, well, how can I prove what that effect is? How can I measure it against price? So I'm pricing it value wise. Who should I be approaching? What messaging should I be using? What's the difference between what a CEO cares about and what a head of IT cares about? And there's a big difference. Start to think about how you qualify for pain. So I think the answer is and that's the early stage, right? So you start to read into that, and that builds you a business plan. And then once you've got an idea of that kind of go-to-market plan and the messaging you're going to use and the people you're going to talk to, how do I start to structure my sales so that I'm conscious about where I'm spending my time, and I know where my deals are going and how frequently how likely they are to close, and then I can start to build probability around that, and I know how much I need to put in at the top of the pipeline or the hopper in order to get what I need at the end. And I think I should have said at the beginning, one of the fundamental things you need to know is, I find it interesting with my customers, the number of them who don't know, is where am I going? So is it I want to sell my company for 100 million in 5 years or 10 years, i.e. then I need a revenue of 10 million or whatever it is, recurring in 5 years' time? Or is it I want to achieve a certain revenue goal by a certain year and then work back from that? Right. But it's difficult, right? And it's one of many jobs founders have to do.
Okay. And as a CRO, now moving from the founder to there's now a CRO. How do you balance the immediate revenue generation needs of a startup with the long-term strategic goals of sustainable growth, right? In my experience, customer success, for example, that's my area of expertise. I think, a lot of founders who I've spoken to about this tend to put a lot of time and effort into their sales team. And then the year after they want to grow, and they tend to put more money into sales team, but not as much into CS. But then again, if you put money into the CS department, they get to retain that revenue, and then the sales team can grow that, right? So that's just my small understanding of it. But question to you now, right?
Yeah, it's really hard, right? I think it's important to have a balance, right? Like the theory of where we're going and the market research is a good thing to have, but it can't be at the expense of actually getting your hands dirty, getting out there, trying to sell, working out where it works and where it doesn't. I think the key is recording what works and what doesn't so that you can analyze it. And then, when you're talking about the CS expansion bit versus getting new sales, I think the first thing to understand is, are you the kind of product who can expand? And i.e., do you have multiple different kinds of use cases, and you can get a small sale here and then you can work on expanding it throughout a big business, maybe a bank or a large tech company, in which case, yeah, the CS element is really important, and having the right model, like, do the account executives help CS expand, or does the CS run the expansion, in which case you need different kinds of CS. And then that also leads into how you structure your lead generation team, right? Like, are you selling small £10,000 deals to lots of companies? You're trying to do hundreds of new customers a year, in which case maybe a more automated lead generation system is good for you, because you don't have to be really kind of have a lot of EQ and get under the surface. Whereas if you're doing a lot of expansion in complicated companies with lots of multiple stakeholders, then you need really bright SDRs and BDRs who can help the account executives navigate who to speak to next and where the opportunity lies. So it's quite a convoluted way. Your original question was like, when a CRO starts, what are their priorities? And I think the answer is they need to be across quite a lot of things, but not spread too thin. And the key priorities are, firstly, get some revenue now and make sure you've got it and it's on a reasonable trajectory. At the same time, do some market research and some testing of your data to see where you're going. But that's a kind of side project. I think the key is getting revenue now. And whether that means you have to start doing some selling, to give yourself a cushion where you can then start to think about the future, or it's hiring the right people because you've already got a reasonable base of sales, then that's the important bit.
Right. And obviously, how critical is the establishment of recurring revenue streams, right? And what role does a CRO play in developing and optimizing these revenue models?
Yeah, I think when it comes to SaaS sales, like, it's pretty established that everyone's going after the recurring revenue bit. It allows them to grow more quickly, and you can not be profitable for several years, because you delay the revenue to the year after year after, so you can spend a lot on customer acquisition. I think that the whole need for a CRO is that you're chasing that recurring revenue, right? Like, if not, you'd have a head of commercial director and a CFO. I think the key with a CRO is they're just about growth. They just focus on the growth. They're almost like slightly at loggerheads with a financial director or a CFO, because the CFO wants to calm things down perhaps and be a bit more measured, and the CRO just wants to go for it as much as possible. And that's a good relationship to have. But I think recurring revenue is everything, right? Like, if you've got recurring revenue, your growth boosts so much faster. You can afford to spend far more on your cost of sale now, because you're not spending huge amounts on making them renew every year, because it's more of an obvious renewal rather than getting them to buy more stuff all the time. So yeah, I think recurring revenue is crucial, and it gives you that multiple when you come to sell a company or you try to value your company, where it's not really about your profit margin, or at least traditionally. That may be changing. It's about how much money you're making each year, because if a company bought you and cut your sales team and marketing team, they cut 50% of the expenditure.
Right. And in your experiences of working with startups in a fractional CRO setting, how has been the relationship with the CFO at the companies, and how does a CRO balance that? And maybe the question is, what does the CEO or the founder of the company need to do to make sure that the CRO and CFO see a similar vision and a similar goal?
I don't think, look, it's not like a battle, right? You don't need to, I think you've highlighted the point. It's about what the CEO has dictated. If I go to see a potential client and I say, what do you want to do? And they want to do some very small growth and they kind of want to stay founder led, that's fine. I don't think that's really a job for a CRO. If you want to do some ambitious growth, then that's a difference. But the key is, have you got budget to assign to this? And if the answer is, yeah, not really, well, that's fine. But you have got to kind of spend money to make money. You've got to assign some budget. And if the CEO has made that decision, then they will have brought the FD or the CFO on board with that call. So I think that's the crucial bit, is if you want to grow fast, then then a CRO is useful. But if you want to grow fast with a CRO, you need a budget, because if you're going to say to them, oh, we can't really hire anyone, we just kind of want to, still flit around and find new customers using the 3 directors we've got. Well, that's not really going to work that well.
Right.
Then you just need a sales consultant to write you a go-to-market plan. That's different.
Right. And apart from recurring revenue growth, what other key metrics should CEOs and startups focus on to gauge the effectiveness of their CRO?
I think the really good companies out there are that are way beyond, my experience and level. They are metrics obsessed, right? Data driven is a really popular term and people use it, and very few companies actually are. Generally speaking, the American ones are really good at it, obviously. I think that the metrics you need to pay attention to are all of them. And when I say that, I mean your responsibility as a CRO is to be across these metrics. So is the need of the sales team in order to achieve this revenue at the end of the year and the number of deals they need to close aligned with whatever the CSM, the customer success team's renewal aimed rate of 90%? Do they match? Is that going to achieve the revenue at the end of the year? If so, how many leads does the sales team need? And therefore, how much of them should come directly from sales? How much should come from marketing? How many, if you need this many leads from marketing, what's the budget we need to assign to them and the number of people there? What's their job description? So it's about aligning all of these principles. And that's why even when you have a head of sales, head of marketing, head of CS, you still have a CRO. It's because they're just making sure that the metrics across all those teams are aligned and all of them are essentially following the end goal, which, as you said, is the recurring revenue at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So short answer to your question is all metrics, but of course, within reason, there are some that are more important than others. Like what's my close rate on opportunities is probably a little bit more important than what are the reasons certain leads are being disqualified, but they could arguably all be important at different times.
And how does in your experiences, how does the presence of a CRO affect investor perception, right, and company valuation?
So this, I have to say, is not, as a founder of a company that hasn't quite got to a point of having my own CRO, but the companies that I've worked in as a CRO, fractionally or otherwise in the past, it does help dramatically because you are able to provide the founders, directors of the company who are seeking investment with the right reports. And if you can go in and say, our customer acquisition cost last year was this, our renewal revenue versus our new business revenue is this, and this is where we hope to take it in the next few years, and these are the number of people we need to do that, and this is where our lifetime customer value is, and all of these numbers look good to investors, and I think it shows you've got things swept up. So of course it's not guaranteed and it's not mandatory, but I think if you can show investors that you've got a plan on paper and that you know how to act it, then that is only going to show you as a company with some promise. Yeah.
Right. And based on your experience, how have you seen the role of the CRO evolve in the tech industry, particularly in B2B SaaS?
I'm not sure I have enough gray hair to ever claim to be an expert on that, but I know what the literature, well, like the history of it is generally. Salesforce was really one of the first companies to come up with the idea of recurring revenue on a software basis. And then the rise of the CRO is kind of, just pre 2010, and then a lot in the 20 teens. I'm sure there are examples that were before that, but that's really where it came into its own, where lots of these software companies following the dot-com boom and bust were able to take on investment in such a way that they could just keep growing. And they didn't really need to be profitable. Examples of this at the beginning are like Facebook, Amazon. Lots of them didn't turn profits for a really long time. So that's where the rise of the CRO comes in. Whereas if you're running a retail or a manufacturing business, the idea of having a chief revenue officer is a bit of a strange one, because revenue isn't necessarily the most important thing. It's about costs and other aspects and new products. Whereas in SaaS, it's much more just about keep growing, keep going.
Yeah. And reflecting on your career so far, what have been some of the most challenging aspects of your roles in revenue, and how have you overcome these challenges?
I think the challenges are often presented as a CR. I'm not going to get into military challenges, that's a whole other thing, but the challenges in sales are really difficult, right? Because you're essentially competing with a bunch of other people who are all heavily incentivized. What's that line? Like, lazy salespeople have skinny kids. Like, everyone is out there hunting for blood, or whatever phrase you want to use. So you're competing with everyone else, and that makes it really, really hard. And there are always going to be companies that win and those that don't. So I think that's one of the hardest things is, whether you're managing a team and you've got to keep them motivated when they're having a bad quarter and they're, about to not get paid half of the money they thought they were going to, or it's getting yourself up in the morning when you keep failing deals and you don't know why, or you're not generating leads. To give you an idea, if you're a lead generator, which is generally the first sales job people do after university, is you get like a 99% rejection rate. But that's a lot of rejection to take in your professional life. And I think that leads on to the next bit, is why do salespeople in tech get paid like ludicrous salaries? And I think the answer is A, because it's really, really difficult and depressing, and it can be quite a lonely job. And B, because you kind of eat what you kill, right? Like you take a huge amount of risk, and if you start to miss your quota, you are going to get fired probably quickly, and that's what justifies the high salaries. And I think that has also been a challenge, because trying to persuade people who run a business where some of their people are being paid £50,000 a year, for want of argument's sake, who are really skilled developers, and the person who founded the business is a technically minded person, and they think, well, why should I pay some smart talking 28-year-old 6 figures when some of my developers have been in the game for 20 years, aren't paid anything like that? Some developers are paid really well, but that's a really difficult conversation to have with a founder. The simple answer is you pay them 6 figures because they bring you in 10 times that every year in revenue, or whatever it is. But that can be a difficult conversation to have, and it's also quite a big upfront cost for some small businesses. If they want to get 2 salespeople, pay them a lot, and rely on them for all their revenue that year, one of them fails, and that's a big failure on your top line.
Yeah. And I want to come back to what we just spoke about, right? So the growth at all costs led to maybe not the rejuvenation of the CRO, let's just say it that way, right? But now we're seeing more a trend towards sustainable growth, right? Where there's less money being invested than compared maybe in 2019, 2020, and 2021. Have you seen an impact of that on that growth at all cost mindset?
I think I've seen companies, because of the situation where there's less money around, or seemingly less money being invested, tighten up on aspects like growth at all costs, because they can't either afford to just burn through their cash to the next investment round because they can't be guaranteed they're going to raise, or if they do, it's at a much lower valuation, so they're much more to conserve cash. So yes, that's absolutely happening at medium size and small. I can't really speak for big ones anymore. Whether it's going to go back to where it was in the future, maybe. I don't know. Whether it's going to stay where it is for a bit longer, I don't know. The talk is that later this year in the UK, at least, there's going to be more money out there. But like all these things, I imagine it will go back somewhat to what it was, but will have changed slightly for the long term.
But then talking about that right now, right? What role how does the CRO's role change in an environment where there's sustainable growth compared to growth at all costs?
Yeah, I think again, the answer to that is the CRO does what the CEO or founders of the company need to get their investment. And if the founders of the company are being told by investors, whoa, slow down, we can't afford another raise this year, then they need to go and give that to the CRO, and the CRO needs to come back and say, that's fine. If you limit my resources by X, or then this is the effect on your revenue is going to have for me. And they should have an algorithm or a system or a spreadsheet that can plug that into and come up with the answer. Or alternatively, if the CEO goes, look, we really need to up our revenue in order to attract investment, then the CRO's job is to say, that's absolutely fine. What's the number you want? Okay, that's what it's going to cost us. And then the CEO or founder needs to make a decision, right? Can we afford that cost with our burn rate, with the current investment environment? So I don't think it's their decision what to do, but it's their decision to advise how to carry it out.
Right. Thank you for that. Look, I want to get a bit into RevCat, the company you've been building. So it'd be great to, first, if you give a bit of an introduction into what you're building and what led to you starting to build this.
Sure. So what are we building? We're building a platform that aims to mimic 90% of the functions of a CRO as either a co-pilot for a founder so that they can, the CRO hat doesn't weigh as much on their head, or as a co-pilot for a CRO, because it can give them data and insights that they wouldn't normally be able to get, or they can focus their time elsewhere. The idea for it was, there are other people doing slightly similar things, not exactly the same, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't be doing it. The idea came when I was a fractional CRO. I got up to a certain number of clients, let's say for argument's sake, 10, and to do my job properly for them, I ran out of days. Like I can't do any more. There's only a certain number of days in the week, and it's quite a manual, heavy process. So I started to build, spreadsheets and other ways of automating the numbers and the plans and the right words to use, whether it's using a little bit of AI or using, thought leadership from across the internet. And then it struck me, well, presumably a machine is much more capable of doing this than I am. And if it can access global data and select the right numbers for you across all the little bits. So let's say your average sale price is £1,000 too high compared to your competition, and the machine can tell you that. Or the way you structured your core value proposition, your key messaging, you should change a few of these words here because some of your competitors are using this, or this is resonating in the market. Or you should pay your account executives a slightly higher proportion of their target because that will give you an edge versus your competition. So that's what we're building, is a machine that can essentially do quite a lot of what the CRO does, the vast majority, but it can do it for about 97% of the price, and 97%, sorry, excuse me, for about 3% of the price, and 1% of the speed, because it takes like 6 or 7 months to hire, onboard, and get a CRO to start doing their job, and they cost, depending on the economic situation, between 300,000 and half a million a year. That's a big outlay.
Right. And sticking to the efficiency and speed, could you maybe dive deeper into how that model compares to traditional revenue growth models / CRO, and if possible, providing some metrics or examples to illustrate these differences?
So a CRO takes 3 months it takes a while to make the decision to hire one. It takes 3 months probably to find one and interview the right one, get them in the business, and then 3 months of onboarding and ramping and them understanding the business and then developing a plan. So you're 6 or 7 months before you've got the plan ready to go, and then you need to start hiring the people for that plan and implementing it. Well, that's quite a long time in the startup world, and that's quite a long, in that time you may have paid them £100,000 or more. So that's that's a lot of money as well. Well, why not use a platform that's going to cost, as I said, about 1% the price? Sorry, excuse me, about 3% of the price, 1% in terms of the speed. And, answer a few questions in an hour or so. The platform goes away and finds the right answer. We, for example, in RevCat have a bit of a human intervention at that point, just to make sure it's not sending you anything crazy, and check your plan and approve it. And then you can go on the platform and implement the plan. But crucially, the plan will adapt and change over time, and it will do that regardless of what else you're doing in the business. You don't have to have a CRO who's they've implemented the plan. Now they've built the plan, 7 months, they start implementing it, and they get distracted from something has happened over here in the market, or a competitor has done this, because they just don't have the time and the focus. But the platform could flag that up to you. Look, there's a competitor over here, they've just done this, and they've just secured one of your target customers. You should be aware of this, and this is some of the ways you compare to them. That's what it does for you, is it's just really fast, saves you a lot of time, saves you a lot of money. And it's also, I suppose, not subject to, the fallibility of human mistakes. And frankly, speaking as a CRO, CROs can be quite hubristic and say, like, I've got the right answer. No, we're going to go ahead with this. And, not always necessarily looking at the data they don't want to see.
And just keeping on that, in terms of the output that RevCat has for a business to look at what's possible with the platform, what can it currently do in terms of telling you what? So you just mentioned competitors, XYZ, but what else can it do?
Sure. So we run through some main sections. I'm not going to bore you by going into lots of detail. You can always call me if you want to know more. Market analysis is the first bit, right? Like, what areas of the world do I want to operate in order to achieve my revenue goals? And in those markets, who exists as competitors? What's the size of the market? What key regulatory concerns do I need to understand? And how do I compare to all of those competitors? And then we need to look at, your revenue goal and how you achieve it. So how you split your renewal revenue, to new business, what your customer acquisition cost is going to be, what revenue retention rate you need, therefore how many sales you need a year and what your average sale price is, and all of this feeding from your CRM, so it knows all the up-to-date information and can say, right, you need to hire 3 account executives with these targets, pay them this much, and that will get you to that revenue with a margin of error. Then you need to know how many leads. So it starts to break down how many lead generators you need, how many customer success managers you need based on how many accounts they can manage or how many leads they can generate. It starts to build you a marketing plan based on that as well. Then it will go through and say, this is the kind of sales process you should be adopting, and these are the stages, and these are the in and out gates, and these are the probability. It will do the same for the lead generation process. It will start to build you a full marketing plan, customer success plan, and competitor analysis. And then in time, it will start to feed from your CRM those success stories you've had and say, did you know that when you sold to Google, there are some really interesting aspects in the notes you've written in the CRM. Well, we suggest this is a good customer story. Why don't, we've written it for you. Why don't you go and get it approved by the customer? So that's a very quick run through of it, what it does. But the idea is a full commercial roadmap and growth strategy.
Amazing. And how do you guys leverage AI then, in general with the platform?
So if you imagine AI is like a really overused word, obviously. So generative AI and machine learning is really how the platform is, with a kind of compliance wrapper around it, so we can back the data. The machine learning bit chooses you the best numbers, and the AI bit chooses you the best words. So the machine learning is going to go out there and compare to all the kinds of trusted data sources what numbers you should have, what leads you should generate, what your average sale price should be, the ratio which you pay people. And then the AI bit will generate you the right words. What's the USPs I should be looking at? What's my target audience, the core messaging, etc. So that's what it does. And then not only does it generate you the original plan, but it sits there in the background and constantly compares and updates you, compares you to what's changing out there, and then gives you updates. So that's one element. Yeah. And then the second element is, should you want to change something in your plan, one number, multiple numbers, one word, multiple words, in time, the second generation of the platform is you will be able to change that and then test it in a safe environment. The platform will come up with the new plan and say, these are the key changes. Would you like to implement this to your master plan or not? So you can use it to experiment as well.
Okay. Sounds very cool. Can you, obviously you released a platform for beta how long ago?
In November. Those trials finished, and now we've got a live platform ready to go as of January 14th. So we've trialed it with, if you add both the trials together, nearly 25 people, and we're starting to bring those people on board as early adoption customers now. So it's really exciting. Yeah.
And can you share a specific case where you guys transformed a client's revenue strategy and growth, maybe without naming them, if you
of course. No, I mean, not using RevCat, right? Because it's far too early. I mean, that's one of the problems we've got is, you can, the RevCat value is really obvious, right? Does it improve my revenue? But it does take a bit of time, at least a quarter, probably a little bit longer to see that. I can give you an example of where, as a kind of fractional CRO, we saw, I can give you two actually. One as a fractional CRO and one as a permanent one. As a fractional one, it was about coming into a social impact company that was, had a really great product, very small, less than 30 people, but really wanted to do some good. But as a result, didn't necessarily have the right commercial mindset. So it was about firstly getting the founders to appreciate, you want to grow. That requires you to become nasty salespeople a little bit and hire nasty salespeople. So getting them around to that idea first, and the idea that you're going to have to spend some money, and then here's the plan. So it's about warning them you're going to have to spend money without saying, by the way, it's going to cost you £500,000 this year, but give them the plan and then take them through that process. And as a result of implementing that, just employing, I think it was 2 new people at first. So we're not talking about reinventing a whole company and shifting everything towards sales. They were able to double their revenue in the next year. So
amazing.
Having not before that. And then the other one, as a permanent CRO, again, similar problems at a cyber company where they'd found lots of really interesting marquee client names, the biggest companies out there, really, some of them, but then trying to persuade them that we need to start getting back into those companies and making the deals bigger and expanding to new areas, and how we do that and how we build a team to do that and how we trust members of that team so that the founders can relinquish control of those accounts that they may even have personal relationships in to, a 30-year-old person on their team who's like, great, I'm going to go in and sell more. That can be quite a daunting prospect. But doing that again, we nearly doubled their revenue in year one. I think we added 85% to the top line.
And how will or does RevCat customize its approach for clients with maybe niche or unique business models in the B2B SaaS space?
It's really good. So the answer is we're getting better at it. At the moment, quite a lot of the customization is done by me. So I will tell the machine to consider certain aspects when developing a plan for that customer. And the reason, the way I do that is by having done quite a lot of discovery with that customer to understand their specific needs and business model. But then we're never, we're unlikely to get a perfect solution first time, but we've given you a framework, and then we work with the customer. We have, as you would appreciate, great customer success to make sure they get my time, our time as a team, to ensure that the plan is right for them. It's going to take some tweaking, and the machine will learn over time what you need, what you want, and get better at giving it to you.
Right. And for founders in early stage companies, obviously we know it's going to take time, but for example, what are the first changes that they can expect after adopting the RevCat method?
I think the first thing you can expect is confidence that you have a plan. Right? That's the first step, is you've got the confidence of a plan, whether it's one of your investors saying, whoa, what are you doing? You're about to hire an account executive and pay them £150,000 a year. Why? Well, because this is going to be their target. They're going to need this many leads, and we've got a plan to get them. This is the average sale price we're doing at the moment. This is the full sales process that I'm going to use to monitor them. This is the core messaging they're going to use, the discovery and qualification progress. I'm going to be able to monitor them at every stage and help them. And I'm not just going to start on day one, and they're going to be completely in the deep end, no idea what to do. And they have to develop that playbook for you, which isn't really necessarily their job. And they may not have the experience for it. So I think it's the confidence to hire the team that you need to grow your company, right? That's the main thing, is the confidence and the understanding.
Right. And generally, what common hesitations do founders have about adopting the method, and how does your approach address these concerns?
Yeah, we're too early. This is the classic one. You're too early. We're way too early. We're still in concept phase or initial customers. Well, of course I would say this, wanting to sell them something, but genuinely, we'll make it work for you pricing wise, but you should have us, or a version of us, or sorry, be thinking about the things we can provide you with from the beginning. The first customer of RevCat was RevCat. We built our business plan based on what RevCat told us to do and my experience. But if you are, as I said at the beginning, you've got an idea. Well, how do you know if it's sellable if you don't have a go-to-market plan? You haven't done any market research. Once you establish that it is, when are you going to find time to do lots of this work, when you're, as a founder, with your head on fire, putting out fires over here, and trying to sell stuff over here? So the earlier you can get it, the better, as long as you can afford it. And we're quite keen on making that work for you. Value. I think the other one we get is we're a very specific business and it won't work for us. Well, yes, possibly that can sometimes actually be true, and it doesn't yet work for them. But everyone thinks their business is specific, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it. And it's their baby, and they really don't want to relinquish it. Well, let's at least have the conversation and see where we can help you. And maybe we give you a limited version of it, and it only helps you in certain areas. But just saying off the bat, sorry, we're so special, no one can help us. Well, okay, are you going to say that to the first CRO who applies for the job? Or it's not.
Yeah,
it's not a particularly long-term plan, I don't think.
Right. And you told me earlier that you used to go into with founders and you used to ask them, where are they going? So where are you going?
Oh yeah, that's good. Okay, fair enough. As far as we can go. No, I mean, look, we have a plan to have we have a plan to have what is it, 190 customers in year one. which I think is doable based on the numbers. It's ambitious, but it's doable. And I want us to be turning over well in excess of 15 million pounds a year in 5 years. If we can get our 200 odd customers in year one, we'll be turning over nearly 2 million, depending on different pricing for different people at different sizes. But from there, it's possible to grow,
Yeah.
100 a year or so. Yeah.
And in terms of the evolution that's gonna accompany that growth, how do you see RevCat evolving in the next few years?
So the cheat cop-out answer, but it is true, is whatever customers tell us they want.
Yeah.
I think this is a major problem generally in lots of businesses, and then go, well, people should buy it. Well, okay, but you should build what people want to buy anyway, right? So we've built a relatively basic platform, which will give people an idea of what they need next. And then, as we said earlier, oh, I'm a really special case. I need this. Cool. Well, if there are enough people who need that, let's build in that function. Where I want to take it is an ability to be really trusted by relatively big companies to handle complex sales operations across multiple product lines in different countries with minimal human impact interaction. So not in terms of features, there's not a huge amount of difference in changing the wheel, although that may change in terms of what customers feedback. But as well as building that test environment for it is giving it the ability to be trusted by relatively big companies who already have CROs to take over some of their function.
Right. To allow more headspace for the CRO to build new revenue streams or enhance their revenue streams.
Yeah, right. Like it's mad if in a few years CROs aren't using AI to help them be better, then they're probably not going to be as good as CROs who have successfully adopted that method. Why not get ahead of the game now?
And in today's current form, what is RevCat looking to do? Perhaps funding round, etc.
So we're looking to raise. We've been bootstrapped until this point. There's a funding round opened at the moment for 2 million worth of funding. But that's a seed round, and we're happy to close an early seed. We look like we are going to close an early pre-seed round within that of the full SEIS of £250,000. And we will use that to really vamp up the front end, which at the moment is a little bit functional, and access more trusted data sources than we already have, which are quite expensive, to give the platform access to more information, and then start to ramp up the sales team. So it's not just me. So that's
Makes
what
sense.
we're to do. Yeah.
Is that what RevCat told you to do?
That's partially what RevCat told me to do. The problem is I told RevCat what to do to some extent. So yes, it's going to give me the answer I want.
Like speaking to yourself in the mirror.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, oh, thank God it's given me the answer I was looking for. That's great. But yeah, no, it did give us a couple of like little areas where we thought, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. So yeah, it does provide little insights already for us.
Right. And as we look towards the future in general, not necessarily RevCat, how do you foresee the role of AI, machine learning, technology evolving in the realm of revenue growth management?
Yeah. I mean, I would never pretend to be an expert in this, but I think it's you grow your revenue by having better information about what's going on out there, whether it's what an individual customer is trying to do, the initiative wanting to do that, or it's what people out there are already doing for those customers, what the price looks like. All of this is information and data, and AI is just going to be better at processing all of that, right? Like it's going to have access to more sources and be able to crunch the data better. And that's what it's already doing. It's in a way what it's been doing for 10 years to some degree. So I think that's the key bit. It's going to be better at crunching the data, and that's not going to be just numbers anymore. It's going to be words as well. And I think that's probably where it's going, but you'd have to ask an actual AI expert to take it from that. But yeah.
If you had one piece of advice you would give to our audience of founders and investors, what would you give them in terms of?
I'm not going to give an investor advice because I think that might come across. I think the advice I give to founders is don't build something because you necessarily, sorry, that's not build something because it's cool, but don't build something assuming everyone's going to immediately buy it. It is really hard to sell stuff, and that's why salespeople get paid a lot of money, and that's why it's quite specialized. And to sell stuff, You've got to listen more than you speak. You don't sell something until you know what someone needs. So think really hard about why someone wants your product and then build the product around that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Tom.
Well,
And for anyone watching who's interested in maybe getting in contact with Tom or with RevCat, I'll put the links in the description. But thank you very much, Tom, for your time.
you're welcome. Thank you, Hugo. It was good.